Okay, so you want to start a new life in Alaska. The last frontier, endless wilderness, no state income tax, and a state that famously pays you just for living there. You've probably heard the pitch. Move to Alaska and collect a check every year. Free money from the oil wealth. And here's the strange part. That check is completely real, but it's also one of the most misunderstood numbers in America, because the same state that pays you to live there is also one of the most expensive places in the country to actually survive. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how the famous Alaska payment works, how much it really is, what it costs to live there, why the two don't cancel out the way people think, and what starting a new life in Alaska actually demands. Let's start with the money everyone's heard about, the Permanent Fund Dividend, or PFD. This is real, and it's genuinely unique in America. Back in the 1970s, when oil was discovered on Alaska's North Slope, the state made a remarkable decision. Instead of spending all that oil revenue immediately, it created the Alaska Permanent Fund, a giant investment account that sets aside a share of the resource wealth. The idea was to make sure the oil money would benefit Alaskans long after the oil ran out. The fund itself has grown into a genuine giant. Tens of billions of dollars invested in stocks, bonds, real estate, and other assets around the world, managed by a dedicated state corporation. Every resident, in a sense, is a tiny shareholder. It's one of the purest real-world examples of a sovereign wealth fund paying an ongoing dividend directly to citizens, and it's studied worldwide as a model for how a place might share resource wealth broadly rather than concentrating it. Since 1982, a portion of the fund's investment earnings has been paid out every year as a dividend to essentially every qualifying resident, including children. So how much is it? This is where the myth and the reality diverge. The dividend changes every year depending on the fund's performance and, increasingly, on political decisions by the state legislature. For 2025, the PFD was set at $1,000 per person. In recent years, it's ranged from around $1,000 up to about $1,700 in 2024, and in the unusual year of 2022, it reached $3,284 because of a special energy relief supplement. For a family of four at the 2025 rate, that's $4,000, real money and a nice benefit. But notice what it is not. It is not a salary. It is not enough to live on. And there are two important catches. First, you have to be a resident for a full calendar year before you even qualify. So if you move in 2026, you won't see your first check until well into 2027 or 2028. Second, the dividend is taxable income. The federal government treats the entire payment as income you have to report. So the headline number is already smaller after taxes. There's also a growing element of political uncertainty around the payment. For decades, the dividend was set by a fixed formula tied to the fund's earnings. But in recent years, facing budget pressures, the state legislature has simply set the amount by decision each year, often well below what the old formula would have produced. That's a crucial thing for any would-be Alaskan to understand. The dividend is not a guaranteed contractual entitlement of a certain size. It's a political decision that can shrink, and has shrunk, when the state's finances are tight. Planning your move around a specific dividend figure is planning around a number that lawmakers can change. Now let's talk about the other side of the ledger, the part the free money story conveniently skips: the cost of living. Alaska is expensive, and in many places brutally so. Nearly everything has to be shipped or flown in, which drives up the price of food, fuel, building materials, and basic goods. Healthcare in particular is dramatically pricier. In major areas, it can run something like 40% above the national average. The average Alaskan spends on the order of $60,000 a year, with a large share of that going to the basics of food and housing. Winter energy costs, heating a home through months of deep cold, can be a serious annual burden, especially outside the cities. Housing itself is another surprise for newcomers. In Anchorage and other population centers, home prices and rents are meaningfully above the national average, driven by limited supply, high construction costs, and short building seasons. And building your own place in a remote area, the classic Alaska fantasy, means hauling materials long distances and doing much of the work in a narrow weather window, which can make a simple cabin cost far more than the same structure would elsewhere. So when you set the famous $1,000 dividend against a cost of living that runs many thousands of dollars above the national norm, the truth becomes clear. The PFD doesn't come close to covering Alaska's higher expenses. It offsets a portion of them. That's the honest framing. The dividend is a partial rebate on the premium you pay to live there, not a reason to move by itself. But here's where Alaska's economics get genuinely interesting, because there's a second financial advantage that matters far more than the dividend for many people: taxes. Alaska has no state income tax and no state sales tax at the state level. For someone earning a good income, that can add up to real savings year after year, often far more than the dividend itself. This is the actual financial case for Alaska, and it's a much stronger one than the PFD headline. A high earner who moves to Alaska keeps more of every paycheck because the state takes none of it in income tax. That structural advantage compounds over time in a way a once-a-year $1,000 check never could. It's worth noting the flip side, though. No income tax also means the state leans heavily on oil revenue to fund its services, which is exactly why the dividend and state budgets are so exposed to the ups and downs of oil prices. The same resource wealth that funds your check also means the state's finances, and by extension the size of your dividend, rise and fall with a commodity market no resident controls. So the financial picture is a tug of war. On one side, no state income or sales tax, plus an annual dividend, pulling in your favor. On the other, a significantly higher cost of living and expensive relocation, pulling against you. Where you land depends enormously on your income and, crucially, on where in Alaska you settle, because Alaska is really two very different places economically. There's urban Alaska, Anchorage, Fairbanks, Juneau, where most people live, where there are real jobs, hospitals, grocery stores, and roads, and where life, while pricey, is recognizably modern. And then there's remote, off-the-road system Alaska, the bush, where the romantic frontier fantasy actually lives, and where the economics change completely. In remote communities, costs skyrocket because everything arrives by small plane or barge. A gallon of milk or fuel in a remote village can cost multiples of what it does in Anchorage. And many remote areas have limited jobs, so the question of how you earn a living becomes as important as how you spend. Which brings us to income, because starting a new life anywhere requires a way to pay for it. Alaska's economy leans heavily on a handful of industries: oil and gas, commercial fishing, healthcare, government, the military, and tourism. Some of these pay well, partly because employers have to offer more to attract people to a remote, harsh state. Commercial fishing and North Slope oil work are famous for high seasonal pay, but they're grueling and often seasonal. The reliable path for most newcomers is to line up solid employment before moving, ideally in healthcare, government, or the trades, rather than arriving and hoping to figure it out, because the high cost of living punishes anyone without income quickly. And the relocation itself is a real expense that people routinely underestimate. Moving belongings to Alaska, whether by barge up the coast or by truck through Canada, costs far more than a typical interstate move, and many newcomers end up selling most of what they own and starting fresh simply because transporting it isn't worth the price. Add the cost of a reliable vehicle suited to the conditions, winter gear, and a financial cushion for the first months, and the true cost of arriving is often thousands of dollars before you've earned a cent or qualified for a single dividend. And then there's the cost that isn't financial at all, the one that catches romantic newcomers off guard. Alaska is physically and psychologically demanding. Winters are long, dark, and cold, with very short days for months at a stretch. Isolation is real, especially away from the cities. The infrastructure many people take for granted, easy medical care, quick deliveries, a short drive to anything, often isn't there. People move north, chasing a dream of freedom and wilderness, and discover that the wilderness is indifferent to them, that darkness wears on the mind, and that self-reliance isn't a lifestyle brand up there. It's a survival requirement. Many newcomers leave within a few years for exactly these reasons. So let's put it all together and answer the real question. Does Alaska pay you to live there? Technically, yes, but that framing gets the economics backwards. The dividend is a modest annual bonus, around $1,000 per person lately, taxable, and available only after a year of residency, and it's dwarfed by a cost of living that runs well above the national average. The genuine financial advantage is the absence of state income and sales tax, which rewards earners far more than the famous check does. And all of it is set against real expenses, a pricey relocation, and demands on your finances, your resilience, and your ability to earn a living in a remote place that have nothing to do with money at all. The honest summary is this: Alaska does not pay you to live there in any way that makes living there cheap. What Alaska offers is a distinctive bargain. Keep more of what you earn through low taxes, receive a small share of the state's oil wealth each year, and in exchange, accept higher prices, hard winters, real isolation, and the need to be genuinely self-reliant. For the right person, someone with a stable income, a tolerance for cold and dark, and a real pull toward wild, open country, that trade can be more than worth it, and the life on the other side of it is one very few places on earth can offer. But it is a trade, not a gift. The check is real. It was just never the point. The point is whether you're built for the frontier that comes with it.